You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Owen.
And I'm Dave.
And we are here today to talk about a topic near and dear to my own heart, the oversimplification of RPGs. And you're probably thinking...
Too complex a description. Narrow it down, please.
Narrow it down. Even dice roll good, pie, good, go. Look,
right.
We could all be playing 2-Up, an Australian gambling game where you flip 2 coins and bet if they're going to come down or not. But what it comes down to is RPGs have always had a certain amount of complexity in them. And for as long as that complexity has existed, some people have been trying to pare it down, out of a genuine desire, I think, at times, to simplify really complex or complicated systems. And the first thing I'd state is, I look at game design as complexity and complication as two distinct things. I think complexity is a good thing, where there are a lot of options and there's a lot of design space available and there's a lot of different choices you can make and each one of the choices are valid. And then there's complication, where you've got 100 different modifiers to remember and they all modify the dice by 1 and you've got to count them all up. I see complexity as a good thing and complication as a bad thing.
Yeah, so the difference between your options and the execution of those options, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah, and also just how much, like, okay, I want to make an attack, right? Okay, so I'm +2 because I'm outnumbering. I'm -2 because I'm on an even ground. I'm +1 because Venus is in retrograde. I'm -1 in, like, you can do an awful lot of that, and it has some merit, but at certain points it just goes off the rails. I've been playing some 2nd edition AD&D at the moment. And there are some wild things in there in terms of, okay, got to calculate this bit now. And
there's some interesting subsystems, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, because I'm playing a Sanicist. I go, okay. Now, there's an awful lot of me marking off PowerPoints, which I don't mind, and then a regen system for PowerPoints where I'm like, okay, how many hours have passed? And how many of those where I was sitting down? And it's, it's fine in one way, but you're very actively resource managing your stuff. And some people don't find that funny. It's like encumbrance.
Yeah.
Encumbrance has an incredibly valuable in-play effect, but no one is willing to play with it, or to give any kind of tools to manage it other than just count up your bulk or count up your weight and tell me how much weight you're carrying.
I have seen some games do things with like physical cards, like to represent,
absolutely.
like anything to reduce the cognitive load has some merit in itself. But you're always paying a cost for things. Like if only you actually have to have those cards, and are you losing some granularity because not all items are the same weight or bulk?
Oh no, absolutely. But you see, the thing is for me that it's a missed opportunity, because the way to do encumbrance correctly is to boil it down a lot into slots, and you give people so many slots and also so much total bulk or whatever encumbrance value you put. And then you've got to kind of balance the two about what you pick. And if you do that and you can make weapon choice matter in situations rather than just this gun the best, I just use this gun, or this sword the best, I just use this sword. And you actually then have a choice of, okay, I can actually only bring 2 main weapons. Because if you were actually trying to carry 2 guns, you would be like, yeah, I can carry about 2 guns. That's about it. It's really awkward after that. Like, I'm slinging one over my shoulder and I'm carrying one in my 2 hands. I do not have space for more gun. And then you start to get into kind of interesting choices about, okay, so which one do I bring? And I think that's where the interesting bit of design space is happening, where the complexity is when I can, I want to take some armor, but I also want to take these two big guns. I can't carry them all, so I guess I'm going to take one of those guns, and then I'm going to take, I've got a special weapon slot now. I'll take some sort of light melee weapon so I can handle that. And that's actually gets into your kind of choices, and you can fiddle with stuff like, for example, you can make swords not a great weapon, but you can make it so swords and daggers are very easy to carry. So you can carry an additional weapon. You're like, oh wow, hold on a second now. I can just have a dagger. Oh, awesome! That's great because that gives me
sword. Swords are not, in fact, the queen of all weapons. In fairness,
yeah. So it's like swords are kind of a mediocre weapon in a lot of ways, but they're really easy to carry, and that was one of the advantages of them. So you start to fiddle around with things like that, and that's my example of complexity. Complication is I can carry 100 pounds worth of stuff, and everything weighs in ounces. And at which point I'm inserting a pistol in my own mouth because this isn't fun. I'm very fiddly calculating. I'm doing work on a calculator to figure out how much am I actually carrying.
You can make an argument that automation tools, like in Roll20 or Foundry or the like, would make that less appalling an option. But
they absolutely do.
It's bad design that it's in there to begin with.
Yeah, so there's things like that where I'm looking at. I like a bit of complexity in my RPGs. I'm not as big a fan of complication because complication is usually kind of fiddly and at the end often doesn't matter very much. That's the killer on complication. It's like, I do all this stuff. What happened? Okay, we made 5 dice rolls. You have a -1 to this attack roll. And you're like, okay, well, that was great. And that's where I'm like, strip that out. Don't need it.
Yeah, you could... Like the argument, one of the better arguments I've seen for fiddly details is an attempt for similitude by means of, well, there's in real life there's a lot of factors that would affect, say, the trajectory of an arrow, like the how far you're pulling back the bowstring, the materials of the string, the materials of the arrow, the materials of the arrowhead. Wind, like lots of things, more than most RPGs will actually look at. Like all RPGs have to be an abstraction by nature, like.
And I've often felt that we kind of abstract that by making attack rolls, and that's our. So like maybe it's not that you failed, maybe it's that your bowstring was a bit tacky or your arrow cocked up on you or something like that. It's like, okay, well, boo, that was a bad shot for me. But sometimes the bad shot is not. That's the ephemera, the minor things, that's the attack roll, and maybe that's enough for us in a lot of cases. And a lot of people will argue, we should just boil down, like, get rid of all these modifiers. Every weapon, like, there's a small weapons and big weapons, and everything is the same. Everything uses the same attack. You just make your attacks, and we're fiddling around too much with stuff, right? And that's gets where and then at the end of that, you do that for a bit, you simplify down, and then you're left with a situation where all of your weapons effectively do slightly different damage, and people all use the highest damage weapons.
Yep.
We used to have speed factors in D&D, for example. There were some weapons that had bonuses. There were some weapons that did more damage on certain targets. All right, these were all things, and there was I'll get rid of these, are irrelevant. And when they did that, they boiled weapons down to just damage.
Yep.
And
maybe how many hands are involved? That's about the only other factor I can think of.
Hands, damage, and then later on we got into DR and like damage reduction, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. And that's relatively recently. So because what happened was you said, okay, this is the best weapon, so I'll just use this greatsword, which you do. Yep.
Greatsword's great.
Yeah, absolutely. But the problem is, if you're just using a greatsword, is that why do we bother with all these other weapons? And it's bad in the core book, but then you have to print a new book with weapons in it, and everyone complains, like, there's nothing better than a greatsword. And you're like, damn it. So you have to invent some new design space. So you end up going back and putting in, okay, let's have damage reduction based on slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning. And let's have traits So this weapon, when you critically hit, does this, and this weapon could be used. And I'm like, you're reinventing the wheel, guys. If we'd kept some of the stuff about reach, maybe, and speed factor, and maybe attack bonuses and penalties on the default weapon thing, you wouldn't be trying to reinvent everything now. Making stuff simpler makes it easier to on-ramp players. When you own it, you just roll a dice, man. That's all you need to do. And then it makes everything after that harder. Because after 3 months of playing, you'd have noticed that the best weapon's a greatsword. And why isn't everybody just using a greatsword?
Yeah. I mean, you get the phenomenon of people making in that situation what mechanically suboptimal choices for a bit of variety. But that's ignoring that in a more, I suppose, a system with a shred more complexity, there will be situations where those weapons wouldn't be suboptimal. They'd actually be better at their niche, but that niche doesn't exist if you render everything down into, well, what does most damage?
Like, when was the last time spears were the best weapon in D&D? Because I'll tell you right now, spears are, historically, absolutely one of the best weapons ever.
Yep.
And if you try and fight a guy with a spear when you have a sword, you are going to learn all about it. All about it, how hard it is.
Yep. Reach is wonderful.
Absolutely. And particularly with a thrusting weapon. Reach is fabulous. You get so many advantages.
The last time I was using a spear-like weapon in a D&D game was 3rd edition with a knight build that basically could make mincemeat of anything that tried to charge in range.
We're using a spear, we're using a lance, because the lance got the lance bonus for charging.
Oh, no, I'm talking about people trying to charge him. Basically, I can't remember the name of the ability, but it meant that you couldn't do 5-foot steps safely near him.
Yes.
Basically, he was the tank. Yeah, he was not fast. He was not stealthy. But by God, could he keep meleeers from getting anywhere near the rest of the party? That's the last time I remember using a spear in D&D.
Yeah, but isn't that kind of weird? Because spears are actually much more of a defensive weapon. They're get in, basically poke someone, provoke them, poke, you know?
Yep.
And they're far more than a defensive weapon. They are strong defensively, but they're also very irritating offensively.
Yeah,
it's that reach area, you know?
Yeah, but that was the way that I was able to play that game, and I mean, in terms of the game, it was a fine tactic and all, but yeah, it's kind of losing something of the possibilities for the spear.
Yeah, and that was only there because it was effectively a feat to patch in that ability. That wasn't the innate 20 quality of the spear, apart from the spear maybe having reach.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it is this thing of they stripped out a bunch of complexity and then have to reintroduce complexity with feats. And you get into this weird sort of argument of, no, you actually can't use the reach unless you have this feat, which lets you do it. And you get into some weird kind of corner cases of, no, you can't just use this weapon. You need to, the feat is the training to use it properly. I was like, well, can't I just figure it out? No, you have to take the feat. And it's an interesting little kind of side thing of, okay, we need to create this now to make this work. And we're patching stuff in. Whereas if we designed the base thing to be slightly more complex, we'd have more interplay innately in the rules kind of built in.
Yeah.
And the trick is designing that elegantly enough so that it's kind of manageable and understandable, but it's not impenetrable. Like, I see people who are coming into RPGs and having played games like Elden Ring and Bloodborne.
Okay.
And they are like, why are the weapons all the same? That's one of their reactions.
Yep, it's a fair question.
They're asking, what's the dagger build like? And they're like, oh, daggers suck. Because daggers suck in almost every RPG. Because they don't do what daggers do, you know? And they don't do what like Elden Ring gave daggers to do, which is this is a vector for attacking very fast, so it's very good at putting on certain status conditions. And that's not there for them. And
yeah, I remember again, going back to the 3E days, you could make a build that made daggers actually useful. But for the same investment, you could make, great swords, far more effective. Like,
you can be power attack, shock trooper, and all that kind of crack.
Yeah.
But the problem is, what you actually like, you want more build diversity, because one of the things that they know that sometimes if you're losing to a person, you have to change your weapon loadout to beat them. That rarely happens in most RPGs. Dior or the equivalent sometimes, but for the rest of the time it's just like, just hit a bit harder, and it's very frustrating. And I understand this push for simplification because it makes it easier to on-ramp people. And some people hate learning things, so they only want to learn a single core mechanic, and that's it. And every time you go, actually, there's some conditions on this, and they go, I don't want to learn anything more. I learned everything I needed to learn, 20 years ago in school. And you're like, that's a terribly negative attitude, sorry. But that's what it kind of comes down as. And they start complaining about math, and it's like, this is addition and subtraction, guys. You did this when you were 5. Come on. But this is suddenly advanced math now. I don't want to do it. And it's difficult to make people learn things, but I think for a lot of good RPG design, you have to be willing to force your players to learn things, because there's more of a game on it. Because every attempt to strip a bunch of complexity out of an RPG results in less design space, so it's harder to design new things, and you often have to design bizarre bolt-on effects to get a bit of complexity and choice back into it.
And worse, you can end up game designers can end up sneakily offloading that responsibility onto GMs or even players.
Oh, they love that. So good.
Yeah,
so good.
like a simple a game that's too simple to do what it purports to do, people will try to make it work. I know I've tried to make games work.
And I mean, I repeatedly see games kind of fall apart because the best weapon's identified, and then everyone just uses that weapon and then complains about that this weapon's too good. When in reality, it is too good because you've simplified everything down too much, so the best damage code weapon is the best weapon. And I mean, that's... basically, if you looked at a one-handed weapon in 5th Ed now that did D10 plus 2 damage,
Yeah.
That's obviously the best weapon. But as you go along, you'll figure out, okay, hang on, there's nothing else to balance this off. This is the damage it does. And that's kind of what we're stuck with. So I would like more options, put it that way. Always like more options.
Yeah, and the 800-pound gorilla in the room continues to be 5th Ed D&D, well, soon to replace by totally not a new edition. And the design decisions made in that do affect the rest of the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to the rest of the market's benefit, I think. So many games, like I was looking at Cyberpunk Red, for example. And one of the problems with that is the weapons are incredibly samey. They
seem quite bland to the point where they very rapidly put out a conversion document for 2020 weapons.
Yeah,
which had a lot of differences between them.
Because, you see, I think they were in trouble right from the start because they hadn't included enough difference, and then they were trying to backwards bolt it on without addressing the core rules, and it makes a lot of work for yourself. When there is interplay between kind of shotguns and rifles that you could do at maybe optimal kill range stuff, and they dug a hole for themselves because they were trying to make it simple from the start. And one of the problems is that in a cyberpunk system, differences in the performance of guns are very important to get people to keep playing so they can buy the bigger gun. There's no such thing as, this gun can only be found inside the tomb of... No, they sell it. They sell it in
Yeah.
a shop, you know. So your barrier to entry is cash, which you have to do jobs to get. But then once you do the jobs, the gear has to be better, and you get into it. You dig a new hole for yourself, going, well, I need to make the gear better. We just add some pluses done to it, which is not often ideal because you're just power creeping everything then. Whereas more space means you can go, ooh, maybe I can do, a couple of different things with this weapon in terms of what it's able to do.
Yeah, weapon abilities, or well, to use a game term, but like I remember the Cyberpunk 2020 system, weapons had all sorts of different roles, and it even came up in the background where the US military was fighting an issue of there's lots of different, rifle equivalent weapons that don't do exactly the same thing. What do we equip our troops with?
Yeah, exactly.
That I found that was a really interesting bit of world building.
100%, and you could do missions with it. We need to figure out which is better in urban combat situations, this pistol or this pistol, because I've got to write a recommendation paper of which one to buy. And that's actually kind of that's a funny session or two of players running around trying to be and different companies trying to bribe them to slant the report. I mean, because the thing is, if you have shotguns and assault rifles doing very different things, and you have limited weapon slots, and then you can buy a super gun that's both, that is basically it's an assault rifle with an optional, it's got a smart barrel that'll switch to shotgun rounds if need be. On your secondary magazine, suddenly that's an amazing gun because it can do both.
Oh, sure, but I could see a way of balancing something like that in such a system with, say, weight, or it's going to be more awkward. Maybe it's more temperamental. Like SAR 2020 had reliability stats, like
absolutely,
and modifying weapons often reduced that.
And then recoil should be a big thing because that's actually should be like a Cyberpunk game shouldn't be doing it's just like D&D, you just roll to attack. It should have there should be a recoil stat which you've got to compensate for. If you don't compensate for, your accuracy is in the toilet, or whatever's in the toilet. There should be kind of encumbrance, there should be handedness, there should be a bunch of stuff that basically makes a lot of different choices for weapons. Some of them are very good, some of them are bad depending on your build. Like some of them need to be, I need 2 hands to hold this, or like this one needs 3 hands to hold. You're like, what? You can reinforce your hands to be count as 2 hands and stuff. And that's the kind of thing to basically sell the setting a little bit of these are regular person guns, these are crazy cyber people guns.
You can't. You try firing this without a cyber arm and a brace spine or whatever. Something's going to break.
Exactly. And that's kind of the fun of a game like that, where it's like, okay, why do people get all cybered up and jacked up? It's like, yeah, you want to use the big guns. That's what you got to be. And that's that's some of the fun of the thing. And I think it really let down Cyberpunk Red, that initial one. And that's one of the reasons why one of the first supplements was here's some of the details of the guns back. It let it down. And I think just trying to oversimplify everything and go, no, everything's just like weapons are just weapons. Like, ugh. If you do that and weapons are going to be important in your system, you're going to find yourself in trouble very quickly. It's like magic weapons being too simple as well. It's like everyone's like, I want a unique magic weapon. What's the system for this? And it's like, well, the game doesn't handle unique magic weapon terribly well because there's only one stat. Whereas if you have multiple stats and you go, okay, normally the stat cap on weapons is this much, but a magic weapon can have a bit more stats, or it can have unique abilities, or it does something you don't expect it to do. And that's
like glow near and glow if there's goblins about,
or double in length on command. I'm like, what? No, you get reach for free, and that can be really surprising. And you get there's a bonus you get in the first round you do that because the guy isn't expecting that. And that's where you'll actually get some fun out of this thing.
Yeah, but that that gives players more options. Yep. Like without necessarily adding ridiculous amounts of complication, as you well put it.
But it also gives the game designers more options because there's more places to go. When weapons only have one stat, you run out of what you can do pretty quickly. When they have multiple substats that are significant, you have more dials to twiddle. Okay, we haven't done a weapon that's very accurate, has low damage, but good armor pen yet. What would be that? And they'd be like, oh, maybe a dirk for stabbing, a poignard or something like that. They're like, okay, bam, let's do that. And that's a different type of dagger we can do then that's basically very accurate and great at getting red armor, but doesn't actually do very much damage. I'm like, okay, that's, that's kind of your arming dirk. That's the one for stabbing knights when they're on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, historically, one of the ways of handling like a knight covered in plate mail.
Yeah. Get him in the islets or get him between the joints.
Yeah, I mean, trying to punch your way through solid plates of iron or steel, it's actually quite tricky.
Yeah. It was good armor for a reason. Alrighty. Well, that's our kind of chat about some more complexity, toss a bit more complexity in your game's rules. Mostly focus on weapons then, but there's other stuff we'd like a bit more complexity on. If there's stuff you'd like to toss around on us or bring up, we'd be happy to have a chat. But for now, this party's over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. Join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, but you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.